Anne Boleyn is one of the best-known wives of Henry VIII. Loving her or hating her, any fan of Tudor dynasty thinks they know how she looked like. Raven hair, darker skin, and dark brown eyes, with extra finger or nail sometimes thrown into the mix. You know, looks perfectly aligning with period idea of evil witch. Hence for any researcher it should be immediate red flag. Is it real? Or is it result of propaganda against her? Or somewhere in between? Let's try to find out. Unfortunately, this cannot be short video. The hype about the woman was strong in past, and nowadays also. A lot of things were written and published or are circulating online, and we need to address them, piece by piece. I just hope you're not going to crucify me in comments for calling some of the widely spread facts for the bullshit it is. How on earth are we still discussing the deformity? It doesn't matter if it is George Wyatt or Nicholas Sanders. Neither guy ever met her. Neither is credible source upon her. Both described very visible deformities, which would be impossible to hide. And logically, visible Adam's apple would start debate if she was a man. What we have is single contemporary report from her coronation, clearly written by a troll. The English translation is actually toned down. Original wording is even worse, saying she had swelling on size of nut which made her monstrous. Often this is wrongly attributed to Chapuis, but it is anonymous actually. There are several other accounts of that coronation. They don't mention any of the hateful or unflattering things the person wrote about. Thus we know the person was either making up stuff or blowing things way out of proportions. I am not saying dismiss the account entirely, but clearly hater wrote it. Take it with a lot of salt. Logically, it's entirely possible and had a mole or a wart. Most of us have some skin imperfection, but I seriously doubt that it truly disfigured her. The troll also claimed and wore mantle with high neck to hide hideous swelling, resembling goiter. Obviously, this is also either lie or over-exaggeration. In reality the Queen and her ladies were wearing normal ceremonial robes. And even if some minor swelling was there, it would most likely be pregnancy-related. Swollen limbs or weight gain are not uncommon in pregnant women even with modern medicine. The thyroid gland can also increase in size during pregnancy, creating a real goiter, but again, nobody else mentions it, so even if swollen thyroid was true, it would be just tiny swelling. Nothing size of goiter. Nor would it made her hideous, and it would be temporary condition, nothing to put off Henry VIII before he married her. I hope we can all agree upon this point. A real deformity is a lie. Now for the rest of her looks. First, her height. We have only one contemporary report of her height, stating she was of middling stature, meaning average, which explains why her height wasn't remarked upon by others. Her eyes were described as black and beautiful and one of her best features. The wording is similar to descriptions of her daughter. I explained in my previous video why we know Elizabeth's eyes weren't just brown, but brown-grey variant of hazel. Thus we have to suspect it in Anne's case also. We just don't have enough contemporary depictions to prove it. Thus while normally we would dismiss grey-eyed depictions of her because it doesn't match brown eyes, in this case, we should keep them as possibility. Then we have two accounts mentioning darker skin complexion. However, the Venetian account is translated exactly as report of Elizabeth by another Venetian ambassador decades later, hence I presume they use exact same words, and it could be same translation/interpretation issue. That it might not be referring to permanent skin tone, but rather temporary discoloration for which mother and daughter could share tendency for. In Elizabeth's case it was huge stress during Mary's reign. In Anne's case, the discoloration, unflattering account of her and delay in meeting King Francis all could be explained by her becoming very seasick while crossing English Channel, or possibly by big nerves prior to the meeting. Second one I cannot completely explain because I don't see any major stressor directly in summer 1531. Although it is said Anne was very emotional about not getting married yet, and on top of that many people blamed her solely for the great matter. and not in peaceful manner. Later that year, angry mob wanted to kill her. So maybe stress also. However, even if Anne actually had darker skin tone, it would be nowhere close to what we consider darker skin tone nowadays. Most likely it would refer to normal average white skin tone, which is darker only in comparison to period ideal fair skin. But just so you know, Anne is not swarthy in every portrait. However, prior to cleaning, some portraits had centuries of grime on top and discolored varnish, thus the skin truly looked olive and the hair very dark. But after cleaning they don't show that anymore, yet we have trouble detaching from that image and insist that is how she looked like, not looking for other possibilities. Another point, her figure. Online you can find information that Anne was of delicate frame. However, this notion comes from 1876 examination of bones in chapel in Tower of London. I don't dismiss it due to alleged wrong age of remains. After all, she was called young twice in 1531, thus I think the 1507 birth date possible. My issue is that even if they got correct bones, the Victorian assessment of the remains might be misleading. They had less knowledge in how shape of skull corresponded to features in life. And by Victorian times, average height changed, hence average Tudor woman might seem smaller and more delicate to Victorians. From Anne's lifetime there is no mention that she was slim or slender, or delicate, just that she was graceful and had elegant figure, which is open to interpretation. Bosom not much raised also can mean small or average, we don't know. And yes, one account states Anne had long neck, it is in plenty of copies, however in originals I would expect it to not show. Partly because she was of average height, but also because the typical angle for Tudor portraits makes the neck appear smaller. Clothes can also make it look shorter. Same with fluctuations in weight. And width of mouth can vary considerably depending on artist. Now, regarding her beauty. There is one account which doesn't praise her looks, and I partly already explained why it could be, and then we have two saying she was good-looking or beautiful. Not all accounts are first-hand though, despite being contemporary. One such is from Venetian ambassador in Paris, which could be him questioning French courtiers who met her, but also him listening to rumors. Second sounds more credible, at least at first. Louis de Hailwigan is recalling conversation he had with John Barlow, then Dean of Westbury. And this is when Barlow compares Anne Boleyn and Bessie Blount. Problem is, there are 3 different versions of what he said. And I don't know which is correct. So here are all 3. Bessie more beautiful or prettier twice, and once Barlow saying both were beauties, but Anne more so. And lastly, Anne's hair color. I am afraid I have to be a bit mean here and put the matter straight. All records stating Anne was brunette, all are questionable. Nightcrow is metaphor, Wolsey is calling Anne bad omen. Allegedly Italian or Venetian reports said Anne had marron hair, meaning chestnut. Chestnuts themselves can be various shades of brown but also very reddish. Problem I have, is that I can't find it. I don't know if it is contemporary, who said it, when, if the person even had chance to meet her. Thus I cannot assess trustworthiness of this claim. Of course it could be some other report, perhaps incorrectly attributed, thus I struggle to find it, but sometimes the reason you cannot find primary source of information, is that there isn't one. That somebody made it up, and rest of us blindly trusted it. Another alleged quote is King Francis calling Anne brown-haired Venus. Problem I have with it is there are 2 versions of what happened, one stating he said it when he met her in Calais in year 1532. Other saying this happened while Anne was in service of Queen Claude, who died in 1524, and that Francis didn't voice it out loud. But that he tributed her beauty in poem he wrote. However, if this version is correct, it might not be about Anne at all. It could be just random poem targeting whatever woman the womanizing King Francis was wooing back then. Similar case with Thomas Wyatt's poetry. 2 poems of his are said to be about Anne, and we cannot prove it in neither case. The first poem is actually way longer than it is usually quoted as. And in full it sounds more like him experiencing emotional roller coaster which we would associate with new love, not him mourning past lover. With him ending it basically saying he hopes his love will be enough to make her stay, because he cannot stand a day without her. The paragraph most talked about is this one, where he changed lines. But first of all, we cannot know when he changed it. We're not clairvoyant. Secondly, what has Anne to do with Wyatt's wealth? With his money? Nobody cares about this little detail. And thirdly, word country has, and had more meanings and can also refer to rural areas. Example, country folk are people from countryside. Thus did the brunette made uproar in entire country or just area Wyatt lived in? If we are being objective, we have to admit we don't know. Thus it might be about other women. Second poem, some people claim it is also about Anne, but that when Wyatt was describing the tresses of crisped gold, that it was a poetic license. I cannot emphasize enough how unprofessional such approach is. To clarify, we have no solid written proof Anne was brunette. Objectively, we truly don't. Also, I don't see why the troll at her coronation wouldn't use her alleged dark hair to portray her negatively. It is odd that he doesn't. Especially since Catherine of Aragon had darker shade of golden strawberry blonde hair, which were period ideal. How to solve this dilemma? Only using her depictions, but which to choose? Lots of portraits have been labeled as her, but we have to reduce it to English fashion and her lifetime. Further from these we have to throw away those where we have no solid clue that it is an or even a royalty, or we have something which disproves it. I couldn't find uncopyrighted picture of Lady Abergavenny, but it has unexplainable I initial upon gable hood, which is of shape circa 1526. No way it is Anne's coronation portrait. Knit Hall portrait is copy of portrait of royal, but in my opinion the AB was added to make it Anne. We can only find similar pendant on sketch of Mary I and rest of outfit fits portraiture of Jane Seymour, which was in parts confused with Anne. Thus I am not ruling it out, but it is not among prime candidates. And all these are based upon single sketch, which only has resemblance to the other sketch going for it, but while majority of differences are explainable. Still it doesn't have to be same person, it could be sisters, cousins etc. In the end there are just 4 depictions which we take seriously. The most happy medal is only one undisputed as being Anne. However, it is badly damaged, not very suitable to compare face, if at all. More as guide to see what she wore and to check proportions of the body. Its copies, whatever it being the woodcut or modern recreation, are even less suitable, and some fans should stop treating them as undamaged original. 3 remaining images need to be judged upon credibility of the identification, and not upon wherever or not the woman seems hot enough. First, the lady in checkers ring. The image is very tiny, without doubt a copy, created circa 1575. Some people claim this hair color is not original, leaving out that Elizabeth I has exact same hair color in that ring, thus it must be by design. While Catherine Parr has been suggested, this French hood was out of style by 1540, thus beside Anne Boleyn only other person who it could be is Mary I, who also had strawberry blonde hair. Sadly, we cannot narrow it down further than that, because image is simply too tiny to figure out the features, so which one do you believe it is? Sister who almost executed her, or her mother? I would go with Anne, but I might be wrong. But I hope you will be on lookout for this outfit in future, because currently the original is lost. And this one has historically accurate shape of French hood. Unlike some more famous depictions labeled as Anne. Yes, despite claims to contrary, all versions of B necklace portraits are copies based upon single copy with inaccurate French hood and longer neck. All except one. And if you want to see it you have to subscribe. Just kidding. But I would appreciate it if you subscribed. And thank you that you're still watching after all this time. You guys are the best. Here is your reward. And before we dwell into why this version has the best shot at being original, I would like to point out this has almost exact same shape as French hood in the ring, just different angle and battlements. This miniature is part of mostly set, unfortunately we don't have it in color in HD. But this will have to do. One of the reasons why I believe it could be original is the vividly blue background. I am not 100% certain, but natural ultramarine is slightly different from all other blues, even artificial ultramarine. Light hits it differently. This seems as real deal to me, and if so, it would be very expensive and unlikely to be used after reign of Elizabeth. It is not as flattering as other versions, but that is exactly what we would expect if it was by Horenbout. Here for comparison Princess Mary and Queen Catherine by Horenbout. If it is copy, then hats off. The accuracy of the outfit is so intriguing. This detail of French hood, which is barely visible, the size of the battlements. Quite often with copies people like to add or change details, creating the historically inaccurate outfit, but despite me being nitpicker I cannot find single flaw with this one. Another point in its favor is that this is the only one which doesn't seem to be Mary Rose Tudor, which honestly would have to seriously be considered a second possible candidate for sitter in rest of B necklace versions. The resemblance is strong. But there are also some differences in proportions and shapes of features. Thank God, I think the fandom would go crazy otherwise. And since Mary was described as great beauty in her youth, women strongly resembling her should be at least very pretty. In case you're worried, the B necklace was part of set of Queens of England originating in 1550s, when it is quite unlikely for somebody to mistaken them. The skin of the woman is where trouble starts. This is very pale skin tone, not dark at all. Except that her chest and neck are a bit more pale than her face. And yes, I can see the reddish-brown hair. Don't celebrate prematurely. Because even if this would be proven as original, in historical portraits there is very common phenomenon which causes pigments to go dark, in hair, to brown or black. Unfortunately most people don't know about it and assume brown is original. But neither of these ladies had brown hair in real life. In this case among early copies of B necklace portrait there is strawberry blonde and auburn. Both of which are more likely to be original than brown. Which though? Well, we already have one on edge of strawberry blonde and light red, let's see if we can get another. This sketch is yet another showing such hair color, but it is also the most heavily disputed depiction of her. Partly because the woman is not hot enough according to fans and doesn't have Anne's trademark brown hair, which by this point you might have guessed, is very likely a myth only. It is without doubt original sketch by Holbein, but it is the label plenty of people have doubts about. And in part this was justified. We know that sketches of Holbein were labelled by 16th century courtier Sir John Chake, who was tutor to Edward VI. In few you can still see his original label in pencil. For while we thought Sir John was wrong on many occasions, however most cases has since been explained and his credibility restored. Yes, he got wrong few minor courtiers, but it is unlikely he got a queen wrong. Another issue people have is that they believe and would never wear something so simple, but sketching of the cloak suggests velvet, it is lined by large piece of fluffy fur, so that is sumptuous, and we don't know the intended colors. Yeah, but what about the coif? Fandom often believes that women of her status wouldn't be caught death in it, aside from nighttime, let alone get portrayed with it. And to those people I say you have to read Edward Hall's account of Anne's coronation, it mentions her wearing coif, twice. I'll give you a moment for this to sunk in. This sketch could be from her coronation, and it is then debatable if coif has some symbolism, or if she simply decided to wear what she was most comfortable in. True, the record states coif with circlet of stones, but pregnant woman might take heavy circlet off, and Holbein might have sketched it separately. Hence we have contemporary sketch, of woman wearing something and would indeed wear, labelled as and by man who met her. I truly don't see any reason to dismiss it as fake. We should stop having doubts, this is indeed Anne and indeed her hair color. Between strawberry blonde and light red. Thus it fits Henry's type, and period ideal. Despite the obvious weight gain, Anne's features are still nice, even in this unfortunate angle, and this is a sketch, in them Holbein tended to do unflattering brows and over-exaggerate raise of nose tiny bit, he would fix it in finish work. She would likely be prettier in real life, but good news is that none of these rule out each other, all three can be Anne. Sketch is her in my opinion, the mostly miniature is the most promising candidate upon darkened original, and maybe if we began searching for original the ring is based upon, we might just find it hidden somewhere as well. I hope you've enjoyed this, give it thumbs up if you did, write me in comments what you think, if I am right, if I am wrong. And here is the summary. Bye. So sorry, I forgot to say that people with strawberry blonde hair quite often have one or two depictions where hair turns more red and darker than it ought to be, thus auburn is also a result of pigments going off, though not as common as darkening.